From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis here on Can TV. Hot enough for you? It's even hot in here today, which is unusual, I must say. So, welcome to the summer edition, the sweltering summer edition of Chicago Newsroom. Tom McNamee and Lou Ransom joining us around the table today, and I'm very happy to have these guys, a distinguished panel. Tom is the editorial page editor of the Chicago Sun-Times, the Pulitzer Prize-winning Chicago Sun-Times.
That's absolutely right.
Yes, and we also have from the Defender, the executive editor of the Defender, Lou, joining us again. This is like the third time I think you've been on the show, so we're really always happy to have you back. There is some news, there's even a little bit of breaking news as we're going on the air, that Emanuel has announced, apparently, forgive me if this is incorrect because we only have this a few minutes, but it appears that he's announced that his kids are going to go to the University of Chicago Lab School, so let the clucking begin. I'm sure the clucking classes are already typing at their blogs about whether that's a good or a bad thing. But really what is going on right now, I think, is that a lot of the stories that we've been following for the last couple of months are getting retopped every couple of days with some new information. And I thought it would be great to sort of sit back with some editorial people and take the long view and sort of see where things are going. Rahm Emanuel's been around for a while now. We're beginning to get a glimpse of him and who he's turning out to be and what his policies are going to be. And Lou, I think I wanted to ask you in particular, last time you were here was right, I think, before the census numbers had been revealed, and it was pretty clear that we were going to see a dramatic drop in the African-American population. Well, boy, did we, 180,000 people, 60,000 whites, and for all effects and purposes, a dramatic drop in the Latino population, even though it went up by a few. I think it went up by about 25,000, but the number of Latinos in Illinois went up 500,000 in 10 years, almost none of it in Chicago. So you're seeing some very interesting demographic and population shifts in the city, which is being reflected in this gargantuan battle that's beginning to really take shape in the city council, where we're seeing 20 or 19 African-American majority wards, and they're trying to hold on to 18 or 19 of them, even though they've lost the equivalent of 3 wards worth of people. And your paper did this really interesting piece not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, on vanishing children, statistically vanishing. Kick us off from there. What is going on?
Well, the numbers were never surprising, because when you saw the dismantling of Chicago public housing, when the CHA started getting rid of those very large concentrations of residents, the question became not just how many would leave, but where they would go. And we called it kind of a second migration, because we had the first migration of people coming from the south, and now this second migration is everybody that has moved out of the city and into the collar suburbs, and some further than that. I mean, they're getting out of town, but it wasn't a big surprise, and people were given Section 8 vouchers and said, well, you can go live anywhere that somebody will accept Section 8. Well, they weren't necessarily accepting Section 8 right there where you lived, so you had to go somewhere else, and so that's what's been happening. And some of the demographics are changing also, because we simply aren't having as many children as we used to have. I come from a family of 13. I have 3. And my kids have all said that. You say we, I assume you're referring to Africans, but it's also true in the Latino community. It's true in the Latino. It's happening everywhere. It costs an awful lot of money to have kids. And that's what people are discovering here. And if you're trying to get a kid into daycare, and you have to pay $350 a week, and then you have 2 or 3, I don't know who can afford that, but people are looking at the real, you could never really afford your kids because they keep coming back for money, you know. Say, but
aren't they supposed to support you? I thought that was the idea.
Yeah, so it's Social Security.
So, you know this better than I do. So you've been studying this more closely. Is when the black population is leaving Chicago, 180,000 people, whatever it is it middle class folks more so than lower class? I mean, what is it?
It was a very good mix because the folks who were leaving CHA, that wasn't middle class folks,
Right.
you know, but there are middle class folks who are leaving too, and so there is a tendency now that some of them are trying to come back, but they're trying to find the right neighborhoods to come back to, and those neighborhoods haven't sprung up yet. Yeah.
I'm really fascinated though by what I know the New York Times has written about this and a number of others about a similar situation going on in New York where you do not have the CHA piece and you don't have the massive depopulation going on, but you also have huge numbers of African American New Yorkers saying that's it, I'm out of here, I'm going to Atlanta, I'm going to Mississippi, I'm going someplace. I'm going, the great migration that the Defender was such a part of 100 years ago, bringing people to Chicago. Now it looks like there's a kind of an out-migration.
Well, and there is a move towards going back to the South.
Although they're going back to the South where the jobs are.
Well, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Mississippi, they're going to Texas.
You're right.
In other words, what's really going on there is black people in this country are doing exactly what white people and everybody else is doing.
Right,
They're going
right.
where the jobs are,
That's
where
right.
the opportunities are, where the schools are better,
That's right.
and where your kid can walk out the door at night and not be in danger.
And they're deciding...
That's actually a really positive thing, maybe not great for
Absolutely,
Chicago.
and they're deciding that the place where that is not is Chicago or New York
Right.
or any number of other big cities.
Right.
Exactly. All the more reason for Chicago to get its act together and improve its schools and do something about crime, because we're in a competitive market. We're trying to sell the city against the suburbs and against cities all across the country.
Were you surprised to see the population numbers go down so dramatically?
I knew they were going down. You could see they were going down. The numbers did surprise me. You know what? Because what gives you the false illusion is the idea. When you work downtown, you see all these yuppie types moving downtown, and the high rises, and they're here and they're there. And you think, my God, we got this big influx of young people and with money and all these sorts of things.
You can fool yourself.
You can fool yourself into thinking the entire city is sort of having this sort of little bit of a residential renaissance, and it's really not that way.
But you even got fooled with all the high-rises downtown, because then you realize that an awful lot of those aren't sold.
Yeah, that's
They're
right.
being rented now, and,
That's right.
some of them aren't even being rented. They're just there's a
empty.
glut downtown.
Yeah.
So you start looking at it. They didn't really. They haven't moved back down because it still is too expensive.
I was in a conversation unrelated with somebody the other day about sort of the daily legacy and all that, and I was saying that I thought that at some point in the future we'd look back and say one of his true great accomplishments was somehow or other attracting all of these universities to sort of take over all these high-rise buildings in the Loop, all these dead third-rate high-rise buildings, and just kind of like build essentially a university town in the South Loop.
That's interesting.
Where you have, you literally have a couple of 100,000 kids living.
Right.
It's one of the biggest college towns in America. But you're exactly right, though, Tom. It completely fools the eye because the southern part of the downtown area just seems to be so alive and vibrant with people all the time. But it's a very small little universe of people. And
It is, although, if you've lived here as long as I think you have, and all of us been here off and on, is if you remember what it was like in 1970, when it was just a ghost downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, so while it's only a partial good that this downtown is thriving and these people move downtown, it is in fact a very good thing.
Oh,
I'm a big believer
didn't
that
mean
the
to say it wasn't
Oh, I know
good.
you. Oh,
It's
sure.
good,
I'm
but
sure. Yeah. It's just that downtown really will drive this city. If we, I'm not a big believer in throwing all our money downtown, but actually I'm a big believer that Millennium Park was a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
I believe in, I think what they've done with the university campus is a wonderful thing. Now Children's Memorial Hospital is going to be moving downtown, and they're leaving the wealthiest, most comfortable ward in the city. So 43rd, would it be? Or 44th. So one of those, Lincoln Park. So they're not going to be hurting for the loss of children. In fact, they have some fantastic development they're doing on that land. Meanwhile, Children's has become part of this trend of these vibrant hubs downtown. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. I parenthetically, I've always just for like the last year or so, I've just been looking at that and thinking, there must be developers who just have to like carry a little cup to catch their drool as they walk past.
Yeah,
that,
really.
You know, just like, oh my God, it's like 30 acres or something at Fullerton and Halstead. It's like there's this perfect triangle.
Right,
It's like,
right.
I want it so bad.
That's right.
And we're going to see in the next few weeks, actually, I guess the designs are going to go before the planning committee, so it'll be interesting to see. So let's talk about his honor, shall we? Let's talk about the mayor. He's been around for a while now. Well, I don't know. Actually, you know what? You tell me what you think.
My take on this has always been, you know, from the beginning when he announced, you know, and we had all the guys, all the candidates who were running come into our office, and we sat down and talked to them. And what amazed me since then was none of them talked about Daley. You know, and it was instructive that the very first...
He was the mayor, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. He was the last mayor.
About 23 years.
We forgot about him.
The very first thing that Rahm Emanuel did after he was sworn in, he went back to his office and signed an executive order on ethics. You know, I said, if that's the first thing that came up and said, now what is he fixing? Well, he's fixing what Daley broke. You know, but nobody wants to acknowledge that Daley broke anything. Said all these fixes that Rahm is there to do, that all reflects on the previous mayor. He was the mayor 22 years. He can't say, well, I only had 6 years or 4 years or 3 years. He had 22 years. You know, so anything that was broken within those 22 years. You know, and so Rahm is there saying, well, we have to fix this. We have a bad budget. We have this. We have this. I said, okay, who did this? You know, and it was like nobody did it. You know, and I said, okay, so but they don't want to mention Daley, and I think it's criminal. I had candidates tell me, well, we just want to look to the future.
We want to look forward.
We don't want to look back. And I say, but the back is kicking you in the butt, you know, so you pretty much need to go back and do that, you know, but that's been the most amazing thing for me in terms of what has transpired over the last few months, and it's Rahm's job, but Rahm's job right now is cleaning up what Daley did, but we don't want to acknowledge that Daley did it. You know, and I said, okay.
Tricky.
I said, okay, you know, even to the point I said, well, Daley still needs his protection, you know, his police cadre. You know, we're going to take it away from Burke, you know, but we're going to keep Daley's for a while.
And then we'll look at it later.
Yeah, why? You know, but it's like that's untouchable. I wrote an editorial saying that he was like, you know, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. You know, because it was as if he never was in office, you know, but still carries the cachet of being the ex-mayor. So when you opened up and saying, well, let's talk about his honor, I said, which one? Which one? You know, I don't give Rahm his honor yet. You know, I mean, 22 years of Daley. Yeah.
What do you think, Tom?
I think Rahm's a control freak. And I don't mean that necessarily bad.
Not necessarily in a pejorative way.
No, good managers are control freaks.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily bad at all. And I think he's learned from his boss, from Barack Obama, about how you do those things. And you know, Obama caught a lot of flack in Washington when he stopped having regular press conferences. But what he was doing at the time when this was an issue was and he's not doing this now, but he was at the time, he was having more of these longer form interviews where he would sit with somebody and I remember defending Obama on that, saying, listen, he's not meeting with the press as frequently as even George W. Bush did, but what he is doing is he's sitting down for an actual in-depth conversation where you learn something.
Right.
So my argument was, it's not a bad way of doing things. It's a different way of doing things. Now, actually, having said that, and I'll get back to Emanuel in a second, it doesn't seem like Obama's having a lot of the long-form stuff either. Right. He really is not meeting with the press in general, and that's a negative. And I think, you know, and so now we have another mayor who's doing things differently. And the first instinct is to say everything he's doing is not the way it used to be. It's all wrong. This can't be good. Mayor Daley was available every single day. You could get questions out of him. You know, he was irascible and irritable and all these things, but you could always ask a question.
Right.
But you know what? Ask a question.
Yeah, and sometimes he'd answer it, you know.
Right. And I think, you know, Rahm is having somewhat regular press conference, but it's very, very controlled.
Very controlled.
And I remember the first example I got that was maybe the first time I met him, because I had not covered him. You know, he came in, when he was running for mayor.
To the editorial board?
Yeah, excuse me, to the editorial board of the Chicago Sun-Times. And the first question I asked him before we even sat down as we were sort of getting together was, so one thing I want to ask you is about your relationship and how you're going to work with the press. And not only did he not answer the question, he dismissed the question. Like, I'm not here to talk about that. People care about big things. And I remember saying, well, I think this is a big thing. He said, no, we have more important things. And to me, that was a real lesson. This guy comes on, he has his agenda of the day, his theme of the day, and he's going to stick with it no matter what. That's more of an observation, to be honest, Ken, than it is a criticism. If I were the mayor, I might have, you have to have a strategy. You cannot just go out there and your strategy is whatever we want, we the press. It has to be a strategy that works for you.
Well, as someone who, I always have to disclaim these things in these conversations lest someone start criticizing us. I did a stint in Mayor Daley's press office. I actually worked for Mayor Daley for a few years in the press office. And this remark is not related to that in any way, but I think that mayors have learned that every once in a while you have to make a bad example. You have to beat up on a reporter. It's good for them. The public loves it. You just kind of like pick somebody and just hammer them.
And you would go out to a press conference knowing that was coming?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, a good example would be what happened to Marianne Ahern yesterday. She's blogged about it on the Channel 5 blog today, that she had a one-on-one sit-down interview with him on some other subject, and she started going off the topic, and they just ended the interview. And when she, when she kind of pushed back on it a little bit, it became very well. You can read it. You can read the account for yourself.
And here's the. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. I think there's a calculation that's good. That every once in a while you just got to just like pick a reporter out of the crowd.
You know what? And you know what? And he's wrong. I mean, it is good to pick on a reporter who is being unfair. I mean, Marianne Ahern is not. In fact, she, to her credit, has been pushing this more than anybody else. That we, the media, have a right to ask questions, and it's our obligation to the city to ask these questions that are not part of the agenda. And she's been doing this since day one, following him down the hall with a microphone if necessary. And the fact that Emanuel now is trying to beat her up for that, it's going to backfire. It's backfiring right now in this show because we're talking about this. We're making this clear that this is what's going on. It does him no good at all to control it so closely that he has a reputation for clamping down.
Well, I would say, and we've talked about this a number of times on the program here before, that in terms of press strategy, and I think of almost everything in terms of press strategy, because your policies are one thing, but if you can't execute them in public, if you can't get the media to either line up with you or at least pave the way for this policy, it isn't going to happen. So that's kind of my bias in this. But in terms of press strategy, it seems to me that this new team has been doing a fairly brilliant job of handling the big stories. Instead of allowing you the helicopter shot to see the whole thing, there's this old parable, isn't there, about describing the elephant by something. That's the Rahm Emanuel press strategy. Today we're going to have a press conference and we're going to let you put your hand on this part of the elephant, and maybe tomorrow, if you're lucky, we'll do another part. And then over a period of weeks you see something else emerging. You see, and I'll throw out my example. I think it's really fascinating that they're kind of, they appear to be emulating other cities in this notion that, well, maybe we ought to try an experiment with privatization for the picking up of recyclables. Everybody knows it's been a disaster the way it's been done. Again, somebody in the past screwed it up. I don't know who that was, but somebody messed it up. We're going to have to do it differently. So what we'll do is we'll do these little tests. We'll have some private guys do it here, and we'll have our guys do it here, and then we'll compare numbers, and we'll see what we're going to do. Well, I don't think it puts me on one side or the other to say that that's a pretty unfair test, because there are contracts in place, there are union contracts in place that automatically mean that that they're going to lose that contest. They can't lose it. They can't win because they're going to be up against Waste Management, who is going to be running one-man trucks with minimum wage people and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Oh, so you think it's a stacked deck and it's intentional
100%.
so that people can see that this isn't working, let's have privatization.
Right. It's an excellent way, if you want to look at it from their perspective, it's a beautiful way to soften up the public, to sort of lead them down that road.
And you would probably argue that he did the same with the unions and their givebacks.
Right.
He
Yes,
said,
I certainly would.
You have a certain amount of time to come up with alternatives. If you don't, we're going to.
Right.
And then he slammed the door so quickly, it really wasn't a fair chance.
And the same thing was done with the teachers, with the teacher raises.
Yeah.
It's like you hand out the budgets and you keep the focus. Today, we're handing out budgets for the Chicago Public Schools. Look, we have good news. Look, it's not as bad as you thought it was. We're not going to talk about teacher raise. That's not part of this conversation. And then later on, it's like, oh, by the way, in order to have that, you can't have that.
See, I take a slightly different view.
Okay.
My view is these things have to be fixed. And the only thing, and I've learned this in the few years I've been in this job, the only way anything gets done in government is when you seize the opportunity when you have it.
Yeah.
And that's what Mike Madigan was doing when he had the second-tier pension system for state public employees. He did it in the dark of night. This had been talked about for years, and nothing gets done until this crucible of angst. And so this is a perfect. He's a new man. He's got like this 6 months to change the world, and after that you can't change the world. Health care under President Obama, whether you care for it or not, would not have been done if he hadn't done it just the way he did. You seize the moment. You've got all the political capital. You've got everybody in your side, and you just get it done. And he's doing the same thing with the teachers and the schools. He's doing the same thing with the city unions. The reality is, and you may not agree, but the reality is that the city's going broke. The city's got to find a way to either to start living within its means, and part of that is trying to come to terms with the pensions and the pay for unionized city workers. Now, you can sit around in this city for years and have these negotiations, which frankly was one reason we endorsed him over Gary Chico. We thought Gary, as much as I admire Gary, we thought he would take that approach. And the view was, you get this stuff done now. And whenever you get stuff done now like this, the immediate criticism is going to be that you're railroading, you're steamrolling people. A little bit of steamrolling is going on, but a little bit of this is understanding from a guy who's been there how stuff gets done. Rahm Emanuel had a lot to do with the health care program getting through Congress.
And that's really one of the reasons why so many people actually flocked to Rahm Emanuel for the election, because he did have that reputation for getting things done. He was not genteel about it, you know, but he was perceived as somebody who would, if he gets in office, then he's going to fix stuff. You know, he's going to do these things. He's not going to worry about how people feel about it or anything, because that was his reputation in the Obama White House, was that, well, he's going to punch you in the jaw, you know, in order to get you to do
you're going to get
punched. So then I moved to the next level, which is, I have no problem with these means. My question is the ends. Are the ends my ends? Do I agree with what he's doing? By and large, I do, actually. So, but that's where, you know, to me, there's more of a debate. Is it right, for instance, to ask city workers to, you know, to take various concessions in order to get, is that something we should be asking them? Those sorts of questions are really good questions. But if he doesn't do this now, Ken, it'll never get done. And if you do it now, you always put yourself up against for criticism of being an insensitive fellow.
And it still comes down to that elephant analogy, because even though he's doing all these things, I don't know what his big picture is.
He's not letting you know.
Yes, I don't know what his big picture is.
And I don't think he has one.
You know, see, no, that's interesting.
I think he's a manager.
I want to say in my own defense, because, my God, you know, this means that maybe if Mayor Emanuel thinks we're criticizing him, he'll never come on the show. But I am not criticizing Mayor Emanuel or his crew. I think he's got some very smart people working for him. I happen to know some of them since I used to work with some of them. My comments are entirely about strategy.
Right.
It's just about, it's like, you know that you've got, and you're absolutely right, you've got a certain amount of time, you've got to get some really, really big things done. Big things that the big guy couldn't get done for 20 years. You got about 6, 8, 10 months, you got to get it done.
And now's when you offend people.
And now's that's exactly right. So it's fascinating to me that the methodology is not, his name just escaped me, Wisconsin governor. Walker. He's not a Walker type, right?
Right.
He doesn't like just stand up there and then just like blurt it all out.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Put it all in your face and say, and if you don't like it, screw you, because I'm in charge. He doesn't do that.
Yeah, that's very true.
He does it in increments.
Right. Yeah, like the frog in the water that's getting hotter and hotter.
Exactly.
Before you know, you're boiling.
You're a boiled frog.
One of these days, you just got like boiled frogs everywhere, and it's like you say, "How did this happen?"
I must say though, because when he did the thing with the unions, saying that we're going to have to lay off these 600 workers or whatnot, we actually wrote an editorial about that, and we said, you know what? Nobody should be surprised. I know what you're saying about if you're not paying real close attention, and clearly you are because you've just summed it up pretty well, then you don't know how incrementally he's sort of pushing this through. But nobody should really be surprised. When he sat down at that firehouse as a candidate and told all these firefighters, you're not going to be happy with things I'll do as mayor, but I hope you know I'm going to tell you to your face I'm doing them. He was making it clear to everybody in the city that this was coming down the road.
There are so many things. We just got like a 5-minute warning here, so we didn't even talk about this
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's almost over. Inmates in animal care, a cute little story today. You guys had that story, right? About they're going to move people from Cook County Hospital to go take care of animals because they don't have enough people. I guess, I don't know if we have enough time, but could you just quickly address this whole issue of Megan McDonald? This is another story that your paper has been all over. And again, you have to summarize it for us in like
I
a
don't know
minute
if
or
I
something
can. I really don't know if I can.
She was the head of DCASE, the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events,
which
after it
was the merged department. There was some question from some people whether or not she was the best person for that job. She was very good at creating events, but maybe not the kind of person who had the vision to do the kind of high cultural things that made Chicago really something admired around the country. But
that's what Lois Weisberg.
That said, her biggest, she was wonderful. But that said, I think the big issue here is her name came up in a report to the police early on in the David Kochman, the young man who was killed when he was punched by R.J. Veneco, the nephew of Mayor Daley, back, 2000, when was it, 2007, I think, maybe?
7, I'm going with 7.
And one of them said, well, we were on our way to Butch McGuire's or something like that, where we were going to meet Megan McDonald, and she is just mortified because she's sort of saying she wasn't there, but she's not 100% sure she wasn't there. And I think what she's really concerned about is that her name's being sullied, and she sees herself as an honorable person trying to do a good job at City Hall. And frankly, friends dropped names. So my position on this is this, and this goes back maybe from watching a lot of Murdoch hearings. I think you err on the side of giving a person the benefit of the doubt. We don't know anything about what her role was. In fact, role is too strong a word. We don't know if she was there in Division Street that or not. And if she was at Division Street, so what?
So what?
So to me, that's sort of a small matter. What's interesting most about that is the Inspector General of City Hall wants to interview her, and she doesn't want to be interviewed. She feels nervous around him. Frankly, I can understand that. Joe Ferguson is a terrific IG. I mean, at least seems to be doing a pretty good job right now. But I can imagine her nervousness. I don't want to make a judgment on this. I was just glad she finally sat down and talked to Carol Marine about it.
I was going to say, I thought it was a very good idea that you had Carol Marine almost doing a kind of a counterbalance in her column yesterday, saying, hey, look, we don't know whether anything actually has even happened here.
And this goes back to the same thing. Carol didn't expect her to call back because she hadn't talked to anybody, and she called back. Whenever you call the media and talk to them about something like this, you usually come off a little bit better.
Yeah. And we also didn't get a chance today to talk about this teacher fit test thing, which you guys are. This is an interesting story, but it'll be something we'll have to talk about at another time. It's just, as usual, the time has just raced away from us here, and I'm just so happy to have Tom McNamee and Lou Ransom with us today. Lou Ransom is executive editor of the Chicago Defender, and we're really happy to have him as a regular here on the show. Tom McNamee, who I hope will become a regular on the show, he's the editorial page editor of the Chicago Sun-Times, and it's really great to have you here. You can contact Tom, but of course you really don't need to because he's an editor, so he's probably hacking your phone and monitoring your conversation as we speak.
Why are we laughing?
I know. Well, of course, that was another era. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV, and you can see us right here all the time, Thursday afternoons, or 6:30, or you can watch us on cable at other times. You can also catch us on cantv.blip.tv. You can check us out on iTunes. You can check us out as an iTunes audio podcast. There are just so many ways to be a part of Chicago Newsroom, and we hope you'll do that. We'll see you next time right here. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching us. See you soon. Bye.